3 a.m. and I'm just about to leave for the airport to meet up with the guys. I have all my gear packed up, ready to go, so it's time to start this road trip to Tenerife. So 6 of us from my astronomy club decided to pool together and split the cost and the effort of bringing the club telescope with us, along with all the other gear that we had personally to bring. And it took a lot of time and effort, especially from one club member who drove this whole project on, to make sure everything went off without a hitch, including building all of the flight cases specifically for the telescope. Now, if you're just planning on bringing your own camera gear and tripod, etc., it's not going to be too hard, but if you're planning on bringing a telescope, it's a whole different ballgame altogether and not for the faint-hearted. So where we were going to be staying for the week was in the caldera on Mount Teide, and at 2,200 meters above sea level and above the clouds, it was going to be the perfect place to do astronomy and astrophotography. So after collecting our gear and loading the 2 rental vans, we started to make our way up the volcano. Now, it was pretty cloudy on the day that we arrived, so we were a little bit worried as we were driving up, but we eventually punched through the clouds and left them behind us. And let me tell you, as somebody who comes from a really cloudy country, there is no better feeling than looking down on the clouds and thinking they're not going to be a problem for the next week. The lush green corona forest that encircles Mount Teide is in stark contrast to the arid landscape that's about to greet you as you enter the caldera, until eventually you see the majestic Mount Teide right in front of you, and this was going to be our home for the next week. Now, there's limited accommodation within the caldera itself, but one of the best places to stay is the astronomer-friendly Parador Hotel. Now, we had toyed about staying further down the mountain in our own villa that had a pool, etc. But what we wanted to do was be able to set up the scope and have a base where we could come and go from without having to be worried about driving late at night. It also meant that once we were finished doing our astrophotography, we could kick back and do some visual observing. So we made it to Mount Teide. The guys are just setting up the telescope on the patio. Let me take you up here, show you some of the view. So over on the west, we have the peak of Teide, and we're looking south tonight from the patio with the club telescope. Can't quite believe it's actually happened. Kudos to the guys for putting all the hard work and effort in. The plan tonight is myself and a friend who are going to be doing some Milky Way panoramic shots are going to head off towards the telescopes that are facing east. So we're going to try and get the Milky Way rising over those. The problem is that at this time of the year, the Milky Way is practically overhead. So we really got to hit it early as the Milky Way is rising. So night one, Milky Way shot over the telescopes, Milky Way panorama, and then some observing with the club Dobsonian telescope. Some of the most common questions I get asked are, what is the gear that you use and how do you set it up? So before I get into the taking of the photos and the results, let me show you my setup. So for me, one of the most important pieces of equipment is the tripod. It's got to be super sturdy, but also has to be lightweight so it's easy to transport. And as if to prove my point, the tripod I'm using to record this video on is wobbling and making the tripod I'm setting up look like it's moving, but it's actually the opposite. So on top of your sturdy tripod, you put your polar alignment head and then attach the move, shoot, move rotator on top of that. On the bottom of the move, shoot, move is a Swiss Arca plate that I'm attaching to a Swiss Arca clamp. Now, you can attach the ball head directly onto the move, shoot, move rotator at this point, but I prefer to use the V-mount that was designed by the late great Alan Wallace, as it creates a better center of gravity over the rotator and it allows you to frame the shots easier. Next, I attach the laser pointer and then continue with the setup. Picked up this L-shaped bracket just before I left for the trip that allows me to mount the camera in portrait or landscape orientation, which is a great option to have if you have to quickly switch between them during your shooting night because the rotator might have moved and you don't have enough room to angle, as you see here on the ball head. So this just gives you some extra options to change the orientation of the camera without having to repolar align.
The next thing I do is to make sure to tighten anything that needs to be tightened, and that includes the intervalometer. Make sure that that's attached to one of the camera legs with Velcro so it doesn't cause any camera shake while you're shooting. So if I was to polar align right now, the laser pointer is going to be hitting off the gear, which is why I use the V-mount, because I can simply move that out of the way just enough so that the laser pointer can hit Polaris, or the SCP. And then once I'm polar aligned, switch off the laser pointer and then loosen the V-plate, move the camera back into position and then retighten. Again, the wobble that you see here is not actually my setup, it's the camera that's recording it. But during the night, if I want to repolar align, it's very easy to just reattach the laser pointer and rinse and repeat. So now we just have to wait for it to get dark.
Let me show you what I brought with me and what I brought it in. So I bring this bag everywhere with me. My wife bought it for me as a Christmas present many, many years ago. And as you can see, it's pretty battered. It's been all over the world. Basically, it fits overhead lockers in the airline, and as long as you're under 10 kg with it, you should be good. So what I brought was the move, shoot, move, and the laser pointer, the wedge, the ball head, and a V plate adapter. So these are all available from Move Shoot Move. The links are in the description below. The main cameras that I brought, I only brought two cameras actually. It was the EOS 6D, which is my main camera, ancient by modern standards, but fantastic astrophotography camera, and a EOS 7D, which was gifted to me from a friend who doesn't use it any longer. I use this bracket. It's basically just an L-shaped Swiss Arca adapter bracket, which allows you to orientate the camera in whatever position that you want really easily without having to kind of move everything around on the ball head. The lenses I brought were the Tacona 12 to 24 wide field, the Samyang 2.8 14mm, that's a fixed lens camera. The other two lenses I brought were the Canon Nifty 50 and a Canon 18 to 135mm. In my check-in bag, I put the Manfrotto 410 geared head. This thing is an absolute beast. I've actually moved away from that now, and I just use the move, shoot, move wedge, or else actually the V plate. A very sturdy geared head, but it's just too heavy for traveling. Then the tripods I used were my old Manfrotto 055 XDB, and this tripod, which is from my AZ GTI Skywatcher telescope. Some other accessories I had with me were the newer leveling base, really handy for achieving level without having to adjust the tripod legs, and this panoramic head, and also a nodal slide rail. I'll explain what those are in a separate video about how to find the nodal point when you're doing panoramas. So make sure you subscribe to be alerted when that video drops. The other bits and pieces I took then were obviously the shutter release cables, some spare ball heads, and then a menagerie of different accessories like lights, levelers, the batteries, obviously a stack of SD cards. I also brought this lens warmer. You just wrap it around the end of the lens, and you can switch here for different settings. So you can have high setting, middle, and low, depending on what the actual dew point is like. I didn't have to use it. And the reason why I didn't have to use it is because the weather over there is so dry, there wasn't a drop of dew.
So yeah, the rare old mountain dew is good when it stays away, especially when you're doing astrophotography. So yeah, this bag is a killer. Basically takes everything, including the laptop there, slides into the back. A fantastic piece of kit. Okay, so on to our first night's shooting. So it was a quick 10-15 minute drive up to where the telescopes were, and a quick look at Google Earth showed us that there was some spots along the road where we could pull in and then also hike up to get a view across. We're above the clouds. The areas to pull in can get quite busy at times, so I would advise leaving early enough so that you can get a place to park. There's a lot of people come here to view the sunset because it's got a fantastic view to the west, and you lose light quite quickly at this part of the world. So if you want to hike relatively comfortably and see where you're going, then make sure you leave in plenty of time. The trails themselves are pretty well signposted, and you'll find them easily enough on Google Maps, etc. And as long as you stick to the trails themselves and you've got a good head torch, you shouldn't have any problem navigating up.
So myself and my good buddy Steve over in the edge of the cliff had a bit of a change of plan tonight. So what we decided to do was to try and do a panorama over the telescopes. So we've hiked up to the top of this hill, and it's got an absolutely stunning view above the clouds. It's just epic. I feel like I'm in heaven at the moment. This is just amazing. So Milky Way is just starting to pop out, and hopefully we'll be able to get some multi-row panos of the Milky Way arching across. Fingers crossed.
So another good reason to get to where you're going while there's daylight is that it's much easier to set up your gear when you can fully see what you're doing. But the minute the sky got dark enough, I started to shoot the individual panorama shots, just gauging the overlap by eye, about 30 degrees per panel. So this is my first attempt at a Milky Way panorama. Here's the result. Gotta say, I'm fairly pleased with how it turned out. I think I could have got a bit more detail in the foreground and even some more structure in the Milky Way. But I think I start to get a hang of this later on in the video, as you'll see with the later shots. And one of the things that surprised me was just how easy it is now to stitch all of these together in Lightroom. When I first started astrophotography many years ago, you had to manually stitch these images together, which was a royal pain. So after we had captured all of our panorama shots, we decided to break down the gear and head back down towards the Parador Hotel, the results of which I'll show you next. But on to the next day.
So last night went pretty well. We shot some panoramas over the telescopes, and then later on we went further back down towards the Parador Hotel, to a very busy area, a lot of cars coming and going, but we managed to get some nice shots. Did manage to get a shot of me standing on some outcropping, which turned out pretty good. So yeah, first night down, pretty happy with how it went. Tonight the plan is to do some deep sky with the gear that we have, so we'll see how that works out. For now we're going for a walk just to kill some hours, but my god, what a place to kill hours. This is just unbelievable.
So this location is called Rocks de Garcia. It's basically across the road from the Parador Hotel. And the eagle-eyed among you might already recognize some of the landscape. This is probably the most photographed foreground for astrophotography on Tenerife. So we expected this walk to take about 40 minutes or so. The sign says we were very much underprepared for how long it was going to take, which was about 3 hours. And luckily we had enough water amongst us, but was quite the hike, I have to say.
This walk has been absolutely stunning, and really don't get a sense on film of just how epic this place is. Feels like I'm walking around on the surface of Mars. But out of breath, oh my god. 2,000 meters up, starting to feel it.
Later on in the video, I hike up to the top of Mount Teide, which is about an extra 1,000 meters in elevation with the guys, so stick around and see how that went. But unlike the locals, it took us a couple of days to get acclimatized to the higher altitude. Everything takes a little bit more effort. Your breathing is a little bit more labored because of the pressure. You basically process less oxygen and can make you feel a lot more fatigued a lot quicker.
and back.
This may be the last time you'll see the members of Limerick Astronomy Club alive. Because we're just after hiking. We're just after hiking from the top of that. And we now have to hike to the top of that. So, I love you, Terry. I love you, Mama. See you on the other side.
All jokes aside, if you ever do feel you're starting to get the effects of altitude sickness, even at 2,000 meters, the safest thing to do is to return to sea level to acclimatize. Don't take any chances. It's not worth it.
It's the morning of day 3. Actually, it's the afternoon of day 3. I stayed awake all night to get as much time on the sky as possible because there is potentially a klima or dust storm coming from the Sahara. So I wanted to get in as many shots as I could last night and this morning. So where I set up was originally up here facing south, but because there was a lot of cars coming up the road, it was kind of destroying the shots. So I decided to move further down here to the patio where the guys were observing and take some shots further up this kind of hill here. And then later on I pulled out one of these deck chairs and laid myself out here and basically faced east and just watched Jupiter, Mars and Orion rising. Orion was really cool, it was rising kind of sideways, which you don't see from our latitude back home. And there was tons of meteors last night, but typically didn't catch any. Just my luck, but who knows, tonight I'm going to try and fish for a few and we'll see what happens, because the Perseids are coming quite close, so we're starting to see quite a few. So fingers crossed for tonight.
Having recovered and learned our lesson from our long hike shenanigans, we decided to spend the rest of the day doing some sightseeing. And gotta say, driving around this island, the roads are absolutely fantastic. Through the landscape that is just literally awe-inspiring is the only word that I can describe it as. You're literally cutting right through a lava field here, and there's plenty of spots to pull over along the way and look down across over at the different Canary Islands. I was really surprised driving around at nighttime coming back from shooting locations just how many people pull up into these areas with telescopes. I've seen an abundance of the new smart telescopes being used, like the Sea Star and the Dwarf, but there's also people then with just their regular refractors as well. And before we knew it, it was starting to get dark again. So the shot I wanted to get tonight was of this particular road leading down towards the Parador Hotel, with me standing in the middle of it with the Milky Way rising overhead. Now, if you've ever seen this road before, you'll probably understand why I wanted to get this shot. It's a really cool kind of vista. It's got a kind of Close Encounters of the Third Kind kind of vibe about it. But it was going to be really challenging because obviously it's quite busy. A lot of cars are going to be coming and going.
So I'm just finished taking some of the foreground shots with whatever ambient light was available, which wasn't a lot. And I've set up now to take a shot facing down the road towards the Parador, and the Milky Way is starting to pop out now overhead. It's very busy, a lot of cars. So I just spent the last 15 minutes or so in the brush taking in the Milky Way. It's pretty awesome here. Waiting for the cars to die down a bit and get a couple of snaps of this. Hopefully you guys can see me. I decided to not run down the van battery. Thought that might be a good idea. I want to be able to get back home. I have been shooting for the last maybe half an hour and not particularly impressed with the landscape, as I believe it's a bit flat. Not that the terrain is flat, but the actual kind of composition is kind of flat. So hopefully it's just what I'm seeing on the back of the camera, and when I blend the Milky Way with the foreground that I shot earlier together, it's gonna work. Another thing is that there's quite a lot of light pollution to the west from the town that's down there, which really does have an impact on the shots that I'm taking. I'm going to give it maybe another hour here, and then I'm going to head back and do some visual observing. So it's 11 o'clock. I think I got the shot I was after. I'm going to head down to another popular spot for astrophotography here. I'm not actually going to take any images. I just want to see how busy it is or not. The other thing is the sky tonight isn't as good as it was last night or the night before. It looks like the effects of the Klima is starting to hit. So we'll see what happens over the next few days. But hopefully we'll get another couple of nights, at least one or two. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Well, luck was on my side and the scene conditions really improved, so I decided to take some time-lapse shots of the Milky Way setting behind Mount Teide with the hikers and their head torches climbing up to the top. And because I was running the auto shoot program on the time-lapse, I was able to spend the night doing some visual observing, and have to say Saturn through the 15-inch Dobsonian really knocked it out of the park.
So this is day 4 and we're at the cable car on Mount Teide, and one of the guys has just gone to get the tickets, so we're going up in about 10 minutes or so. So super excited to see what the view is going to be like from the extra 1,000 or so meters. We're going to go right up to the top there, so let's go. A maximum of 1 hour up on the peak if we manage to actually walk up.
James. Yeah. James there. Okay. After Francie. Okay. That's great. Perfect. Enjoy. Enjoy. Yeah.
So this is it. We're about to start our ascent to the top of the volcano. We just had the chat from the guy at the gate. Told us to take it slowly. I'm absolutely taking it slowly. I can already feel the effects of the altitude. Blood oxygen is down around 90%. Heart rate is at about 100, but that's normal for this kind of an altitude. So just the trick is take it easy. Enjoy the view. Halfway up, and I can see that the rocks are starting to change to a kind of a reddish, even greenish, sulfury kind of color. Really starting to smell the sulfur now. You can see the greeny, yellowy colour on the rocks. Really strong smell. actually steam coming out of the vents here, and you can see the steam here coming out of this vent, and if you put your hand really close, oh, it actually gets unbearable. You can't, oh, my glasses are fogging up. It actually becomes so hot you can't keep your hand there. That's really cool. So getting close to the top, last couple of meters. Oh wow. So this is it, we've made it to the peak of El Teide at 3,700 and some meters. Can't remember exactly, but pretty high. Check out the view. So we made it from the top of the peak of El Teide, and we've driven up here tonight to see what the telescopes look like from this side of the island, which is really cool because you've got the sunset over there. And later on, what we're going to do is drive back around and try and get some blue light shots of the telescopes in the foreground. So let's see how that works out. Glasses. So change of plan again. Myself and my good mate Steve have decided that this view is actually pretty cool because it's facing west and the telescopes are getting really nicely lit by the setting sun. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and take some nice foreground shots here, and I'm just trying to find a location to shoot from. So I think this looks pretty cool. Gonna set up and take some shots. So that's my close foreground shot, and what I'm going to do is set up the camera again, make sure it's level, and then take my 50mm pano across. So because the light level is dropping pretty fast, I'm probably not going to be able to do much more recording. So see you on the other side. Hopefully in the next shot you're going to see the results of tonight's photo shoot, and it's as good as I hope it's going to turn out. We decided to take a spin to the beach. This is Las Cristianas. So we're just after having a swim and we're heading back to get something to eat. I think it was a well-deserved beach day after the 4 nights that we've had. So the good news is that the clima seems to have passed over. So the scene tonight up on the volcano is going to be pretty good. So we're going to get the scope out early tonight, do some visual observing, and also get the cameras running as well. So looking forward to that, but I'm looking more forward to a nice tasty pizza right now. So if you were to ask me what could I say about bringing a 15-inch telescope to Tenerife, this is what I'd say. So last night was night number 6 and we had a very bad clima obscuring the Milky Way, so we didn't even try to do astrophotography. We did set up the telescope and we just observed some double stars and some binocular observing, but that was pretty much it for the night. So we're just going to spend the rest of the day actually packing up the telescope and the gear because we've got an early flight out tomorrow morning. But it looks like it's actually clearing already and the forecast for tonight is pretty good. So we'll probably leave some of the camera gear out just in case it's really good. Just to try and catch the last couple of hours before we actually have to get up and go to the airport tomorrow morning. So fingers crossed we get one more night here on Tenerife. So it's roughly about an hour before the sun goes down and we've got a 40-minute trek across this volcano over to a ridge that faces west to see the sunset. Hopefully the views are going to be worth the hike. So all things considered, what do I think of coming to Tenerife for a week of astronomy and astrophotography? Tenerife is a fantastic location if you are into astronomy, but it depends on what type of astronomy. So if you're an astrophotographer, the issue really is it's very popular. What I found is that there is real no escape from people like me driving their cars out to remote locations to shoot some photographs, and what you'll find is that the night sky gets filled up with car headlights quite often, which ruins your shots. The other thing that you have to consider is that the clima can really destroy your images, and it's quite hard to predict. So you really are taking a chance when you come here. So make sure that you check that out. So I think for my next astrophotography trip, I'm going to probably try La Palma, purely for the fact that I know that the light pollution situation isn't as bad, and I think that I'm going to get some better shots there, especially track shots. It's really hard to pack up tonight and pull myself away from this scenery and the absolutely majestic Milky Way arching from horizon to horizon. Such a fantastic landscape, but all good things have to come to an end, and back home to cloudy, rainy Ireland I must go. So guys, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully the images turned out as well as I hope they'll turn out. Please, if you haven't subscribed, do. It really does help the channel. And cheers guys, keep looking up.